Behind the scenes, Taylor was a man who frequently faltered, plagued by addiction, haunted by childhood traumas, burdened by the loneliness of being an artist, and under the pressure of being a performance machine that isn't allowed to stop. He personified raw life power. In addition to bringing the band to its knees, his untimely death in Colombia on the evening of March 25, 2022, an hour before showtime, left a huge hole in the hearts of fans everywhere. However, we need to go back in time to see why Taylor Hawkins was not only a talented drummer, but also a representation of a whole rock generation, a solo that still reverberates in the memories of those who loved him, full of highs and lows, occasionally unconventional, but never lacking in passion. Early life. Taylor Hawkins, the youngest of 3 siblings, was born in Fort Worth, Texas, on February 17, 1972. When Taylor was only 5 years old, his family later relocated to Laguna Beach, California, a stunning seaside community that was teeming with unseen forces. His father was the stereotypical male of the 1970s, reserved, hardy, and emotionally aloof. Every child in the home had to learn to live with his mother's quiet demons, despite her constant tenderness and love. "My mom had a dark side," Taylor once remarked. "My sister Heather prepared dinner and took care of everything when she collapsed on the couch from weariness." According to Taylor, his mother was the only person who genuinely thought he had what it took to be a musician. He pretended to perform while dancing, singing, and standing in the living room. The only person in the audience who gave a patient clap was her. She was also the first to notice his interest in drumming and to think he would succeed. However, his father was not really interested. Taylor once revealed that, possibly due to work and the emotional reserve of a generation not used to open devotion, his father never fully recognized his talent or passions. This was not because he was harsh. Taylor turned to music as an escape from that emotional void. At one point, he called himself a fat, stupid child who was unsuccessful at everything, not socially popular, not athletic, and not good at school. When he was allowed to play an old drum equipment by a neighbor, everything changed. Taylor fell in love right away, and his neighbor supported him. "You're a natural drummer." A stack of rock records was left behind when his female friend's older brother enlisted in the military. Taylor's life changed when he came across Queen's News of the Life among those dusty, corner-worn LP jackets. He lost himself in Roger Taylor's drumming and let the sweeping John Williams themes and the Star Wars and Superman soundtracks enchant him. He claimed to have heard large, dramatic, emotionally complex noises with his ears, but that he also felt them with his heart. Taylor lived in 2 different universes while she was in high school: daytime surfing, nighttime playing in different cover bands, and drum practice while listening to Rush, Genesis, and Police albums. Taylor turned to alternative rock, particularly Jane's Addiction, whose honest, raw, and rebellious sound gave him a sense of belonging even if glam metal was dominating the charts at the time. Nobody could have imagined that a set of drumsticks would provide the outlet for this insecure child who struggled with almost everything. Few people understood that it was precisely this quiet, complex upbringing that molded him into an artist who was intensely sensitive off stage but blazed brightly on stage. Early career. Taylor Hawkins traveled to Venice after graduating from high school, where he became involved in the gritty street music scene, a society in which youthful musicians used music to find freedom rather than fame. There, he and his pals started a small band named Sylvia, which was obviously influenced by Jane's Addiction, unpolished and raw, yet teeming with instinct and hunger. Sylvia gave a performance at Club Lingerie, a tiny Los Angeles club, one evening. A man named Stevie Salas, who was searching for a drummer for Canadian vocalist Sass Jordan, was among the small group of people who was set to open for the European tour of Aerosmith. Salas was more impressed by the sight of a long-haired drummer with uncontrollable intensity and presence than he was by the ensemble as a whole. He merely stated, "I need someone who understands punk and alternative, and that kid has something strange about him," following the performance. When Taylor Hawkins joined Sass Jordan on his debut tour at the age of 22, he instantly made an impression on the stage. even if his talents were still a little rough around the edges. Jordan said that he had a light and love radiating from within him. She remembered that she had known as soon as he entered the room, some people make you feel attracted to them. Among them was Taylor. When Taylor opened for Steve Perry, the iconic Journey frontman, Scott Welch, Perry's manager who also worked with up-and-coming star Alanis Morissette, took notice. Alanis was searching for a drummer for her world tour at the time, having just finished her breakout album, Jagged Little Pill. Taylor was invited to try out right away, and she swiftly joined guitarist Chris Chaney as a vital member of Alanis's live band. A thrilling 2-year trip ensued, during which they performed on some of the world's largest stages. Taylor Hawkins was just as noticeable as the lead singer thanks to his eye-catching appearance, showman-style drumming, and wind-swept blonde hair. But he was more than a drummer. He contributed to the soul of Ironic, Hand in My Pocket, and You Oughta Know's ferocious performances. Taylor once said that he opted to play behind a solo artist, since it was a legitimate band, and not just her performance. Alanis allowed me to be who I am. I had the opportunity to play music with all of my heart. Taylor first got to meet Dave Grohl during KROQ's almost acoustic Christmas concert in 1995. Alanis and Foo Fighters were on the lineup that day. I was just the backup drummer kid, and Dave was the guy I idolized in Nirvana, Taylor subsequently stated. However, he was really amiable. I knew I had met the person who would transform my life while we smoked together and discussed Queen and the Cops. Nobody at the time could have foreseen it. However, it also signaled the start of a new chapter in which Taylor would take the lead as the official drummer of the Foo Fighters, and stop hiding behind the spotlight. It also marked the beginning of one of the strongest friendships in rock history. However, the path ahead would be everything but easy, much like everything else in Taylor Hawkins' life. Career breakthrough in 1997. Following William Goldsmith's resignation, Taylor Hawkins immediately answered Dave Grohl's call, asking if he knew of any drummers that would be a good fit for the Foo Fighters. Yes, he replied, succinctly, firmly, and passionately, I'll do it. Although Alanis Morissette had already taken the globe by storm, and the Foo Fighters were still a relatively new band, Taylor chose rock because it made him feel alive, not because it was profitable. On April 19, 1997, he performed his debut show with the Foo Fighters, in a covert performance at the Alligator Lounge in Santa Monica. From then he accompanied the band on a trip that took them through every phase of their development, from thrilling stadium shows to media skepticism. There Is Nothing Left to Lose, released in 1999, was the first album on which Taylor served as the official drummer. Despite playing only a portion of the record, he said that he had red light fever and was anxious in the studio. The uneasiness that arises as the recording light in the studio turns on. However, this was the start of a strong relationship with Grohl. As a former drummer for Nirvana, Dave knew just what he needed from one. Taylor, who had admired Grohl since he was a teenager, gave the group a new energy. The Foo Fighters were starting to gain popularity by the early 2000s. After a close breakup and difficult recording sessions, the band's 2002 album One by One, which had songs like All My Life and Times Like These, signaled a comeback. Taylor was not merely a drummer. In order to combine arena rock force with uncompromising authenticity, he co-wrote, organized, and contributed to the definition of a sound that was both precise and ferocious. The Foo Fighters rose to prominence as one of the world's most popular rock bands in the ensuing years. They played famous stages, sold tens of millions of CDs, and won Grammy Awards. Taylor Hawkins, with his golden hair, powerful drumming, and unquestionable stage presence, was essential to that triumph at Wembley, Glastonbury, Lollapalooza, and Rock in Rio. However, Taylor's achievements went beyond Foo Fighters. In 2006, he formed Taylor Hawkins and the Coattail Riders, and started writing his own songs, playing guitar, and singing lead. A band that allowed him to explore a different, more creative, hilarious, and unrestricted side of himself. He demonstrated that he was a full-fledged musician, in addition to being an amazing drummer with albums like Red Light Fever and Get the Money. In addition, he joined a number of side projects, such as the cover band Chevy Metal, NHC, Jane's Addiction, and Birds of Satan. He started working with legendary artists like Brian May, Slash, Elton John, Coheed, and Cambria on a regular basis. Taylor Hawkins provided the distinctive personality that drums needed. Taylor was the stage's lifeblood beyond everything else. He did more than play. He sang, narrated, and occasionally switched places with Dave Grohl to take the lead. His performances of Led Zeppelin's Rock and Roll, Queen, Somebody to Love, and Under Pressure were frequently the high points of every performance. Taylor performed on every major album throughout his nearly 25 years with the Foo Fighters, including In Your Honor, Concrete, and Gold. He also played on Medicine at Midnight, 2021, which he previously called weird, experimental, but thrilling. Taylor Hawkins maintained his garage band vibe while becoming one of the world's most famous drummers. Wild, unbridled, and always producing. He didn't see drumming as a career. There was no other way to be who he really was. And since he lived that way, completely and violently, every performance, beat and laugh contributed to an irreplaceable musical legacy. He did more than merely keep the band in time as the drummer. For almost 30 years, he was the one who kept supporters' hearts pounding. Addiction and struggles. Taylor Hawkins once jokingly said that he would definitely be delivering pizzas if he weren't the drummer for the Foo Fighters. That half-joking comment exposed a truth, not just modesty. He didn't consider himself an untouchable rock star. Whether it was fame, passion, or simply the sense of freedom, Taylor always seemed to be pursuing something. Additionally, because he never stopped running, he occasionally went beyond his own boundaries. As Foo Fighters gained popularity in the late 1990s, their tour schedule grew unrelenting. Noise, hotels, stages, airlines, one tour after another, and the need to maintain rock energy every night. Having experienced the tragedy and glare of Nirvana, Dave Grohl was accustomed to it. However, this pace was a shock to the system for Taylor, who had just moved from being Alanis Morissette's backup drummer to a full-time member of a growing international band. Taylor took too much heroin in 2001 after a night of partying in the UK, immediately following a performance at the V Festival. The fact that he was unconscious by the following morning is all that is known about what transpired. He was in a severe coma, according to the doctors. The recollection still haunts his loved ones like a bad dream. A friend, bandmate, and leader of Dave Grohl waited by his hospital bed. It seemed for a while that history was being repeated. Kurt Cobain was already gone. He was now in danger of losing another brother. However, Taylor awoke and faced himself for the first time. He eventually said, "I loved doing drugs, but I lost control," but he didn't instantly alter. "I was a believer in the adage live fast, die young, and I nearly lived it out." Slowly and gradually, recovery occurred. He gave up smoking, began working out, and developed a new addiction, mountain biking, that was healthier but yet showed his ongoing need to satisfy a need. He sought to live a more balanced life, spent more time with his family, and became more conscious of his health. However, too much stillness could also cause uneasiness for an artist who is constantly moving to the beat. Taylor started to worry about his physical limitations in his 40s. He acknowledged that his body, not the lights, was the source of his stage fear. He told Rolling Stone, "I'm not 25 anymore. I have to keep up with folks who are 20 years younger every time I take the stage. Fighting my own age is what it is." Those around him started to notice changes in 2018. Yeti, his longtime drum tech, recalls a moment when Taylor appeared exhausted, lost a lot of weight, and had trouble sleeping. He appeared nervous all the time, ate erratically, and exercised less. He never voiced his displeasure in public, but the changes were evident in small ways. A slower voice, sunken eyes, and perhaps a pause in between bursts of laughing. After COVID, the Foo Fighters resumed touring in late 2021, with a full program. Taylor had to be given intravenous fluids to revive him after passing out one night on an aircraft. Taylor finally had to face the ultimate threshold when he didn't show up for the Abu Dhabi gig, according to Red Hot Chili Peppers drummer Chad Smith, his well-being. Close friends claim that shortly after, Taylor spoke privately with Dave Grohl and the band's management, asking for a more relaxed tour schedule. "I can no longer keep up this pace," he said. We have to come up with a solution. However, Foo Fighters camp turned down any official request. Everyone either said it was merely a personal reflection and not an official request, or they all remained mute. What matters is that Taylor never gave up trying in spite of his weariness. In early 2022, he excitedly told Yeti, "I've hired a trainer, I'm working hard, I've gained 15 pounds, I'm finally doing it right." Those closest to him believed Taylor truly wanted to get back on track, to stay healthy, to restore balance. But sometimes, recovery arrives slower than the body allows, and Taylor Hawkins, though he had walked through the darkness, still carried scars not visible to the eye, but never erased. Even amid the thunder of his drums, he was an artist who lived with heartbreaking honesty, and like so many in that world, the price of truth is often the hardest to predict. Personal life. Taylor Hawkins was never the kind of artist who put his private life on display. He wasn't caught in romantic scandals, didn't cross over into media circuits, and rarely shared personal stories on talk shows. But to those who knew him well, Taylor was a deeply affectionate man, fiercely loyal to his family, and someone who lived with a simplicity that seemed almost surprising given the spotlight he had stepped into. In 2005, during a peak in his career with Foo Fighters, Taylor married Allison, the woman who stood by his side for more than 17 years. They weren't a red carpet couple, but in every chapter of his journey, from the stage to behind the scenes, Allison was there. Together, they had 3 children, including their daughter Annabelle, who directly inspired the song Middle Child, featured on Taylor's solo album Get the Money. In it, he explored some of the most intimate facets of being a suburban dad. Get the Money wasn't just a fun side project, it was a brief but heartfelt declaration. Taylor wasn't only the drummer in a legendary rock band. He was a man who drove his kids to school, spent evenings playing guitar in the garage, and occasionally drummed with friends' cover bands at local events. He once said, "I know I'll never be a Freddie Mercury or a Dave Grohl, but I can be a good dad, a funny husband and a nice neighbor. That's enough for me." When not on tour, Taylor lived in Topanga Canyon, a quiet wooded area in California, where the air smelled of pine and the hills rolled endlessly. There, he built a small home studio, working independently, jamming with friends, writing, recording, sometimes just for fun. Neighbors described him as cheerful, often seen biking in the mornings, greeting everyone, never acting like a rock star. Yet as a sensitive artist, Taylor carried his share of insecurities. In one rare interview, he confessed to feeling overwhelmed by his role. "But a lot of times I just want to go home, sit with my daughter and watch cartoons." Taylor loved his wife, his kids and his fans. In his own private manner, he was well known for constantly signing autographs, never turning down a picture, and above all, never undervaluing the affection of his fans. Before his death, Emma Sophia, then 9 years old, carried her toy drum equipment outside his hotel and performed for her idol. This is one of the now famous stories about her. Taylor spent time conversing with her, offering encouragement, and flashing what many called the warmest grin of the day, instead of just coming down to snap a photo. According to Emma's parents, Taylor made the most of what should have been her worst day. To be remembered, he didn't require large platforms or ostentatious honors. In addition to being a great drummer, Taylor Hawkins made a lasting impression by living among people as though music were genuine, uncomplicated, and able to move people with a simple word of encouragement, a slap on the back, or an embrace for his daughter in the middle of the night. Since those who live from the heart never need to prove it, he didn't need a medal to demonstrate that he was a good father. Last year's Taylor Hawkins was no longer the flamboyant young man running across the stage with his hair blowing in the breeze. As he approached his 50s, he continued to exude a remarkable vitality and compelled people to stand when his drums began to play. However, his mind and body had started to communicate distress. Taylor was more torn than ever after the COVID-19 epidemic, when Foo Fighters made a comeback with the album Medicine at Midnight and the horror comedy movie Studio 666. Music was his life, therefore he wanted to continue, but the constant pace was wearing him out both psychologically and physically. He acknowledged that he was experiencing stage fright and that his confidence had diminished. "I am no longer the 25-year-old kid. Every show makes me feel like I'm in a race to stay alive." Taylor lost unconscious on a flight to Abu Dhabi in late 2021 and required intravenous infusions to resuscitate him. The performance was cancelled. It seemed like a warning after that occurrence. "I can't keep doing this," Taylor told Dave Grohl and the band's management in a serious conversation, according to Red Hot Chili Peppers drummer Chad Smith. "We must adapt." Taylor Hawkins was no longer the flamboyant young man running across the stage with his hair blowing in the breeze as he approached his 40s. He nevertheless exuded a remarkable vitality, still caused crowds to stand up as soon as his drums began to play. However, his mind and body had started to communicate distress. Taylor was more torn than ever after the COVID-19 epidemic, when Foo Fighters made a comeback with the horror comedy movie Studio 666 and the album Medicine at Midnight. He wanted to continue. On the one hand, his life was music. On the other hand, he was exhausted by the unrelenting schedule, both psychologically and physically. He acknowledged that he was experiencing stage fright and that his confidence had diminished. "I am no longer the 25-year-old kid. It feels like a race in every show. All I'm trying to do is stay alive." Taylor lost unconscious on a flight to Abu Dhabi in late 2021 and required intravenous infusions to resuscitate him. The performance was cancelled. It seemed like a warning after that occurrence. "I can't keep doing this," Taylor told Dave Grohl and the band's management in a serious conversation, according to Red Hot Chili Peppers drummer Chad Smith. "We must adapt." An ambulance arrived around 7:40 p.m. Taylor Hawkins was gone while paramedics tried CPR. No more teasing smiles, no more drumming, no more glistening eyes under that long blonde hair. At the age of 50, he passed away instantly. At 9:59 p.m., the band broke the devastating news, minutes after hundreds of spectators found out the show would not proceed. That same evening, there was silence on the stage. The music ceased. There were only tears and candles left, response from the public, and unanswered questions. In addition to shocking the music community, the news of Taylor Hawkins' unexpected death that broke on the evening of March 25, 2022, had a devastating impact on people all across the world. Thousands of people were still waiting in anticipation for Foo Fighters' performance at the Estéreo Picnic Festival stage in Bogotá. They didn't know that an hour before the stage lights were supposed to turn on, the band's flaming drummer had passed away. Rather than the booming drum beat that never stopped, the night was filled with whispers and stifled sobbing. No longer was the stage used for performances. Hundreds of candles were lit as a memorial for a person who had departed from the game he loved above all else. The rest of the Foo Fighters' South American tour was promptly cancelled. The Foo Fighters family is devastated by the sudden and tragic loss of our beloved brother Taylor Hawkins. They wrote in a succinct but poignant statement, "His spirit of music and joy will always be with us." Major musicians paid their respects in their own ways as the message swiftly gained traction. Taylor was described by Ozzy Osbourne as an amazing musician and a nice person. Emotionally overwhelmed, Travis Barker remarked, "I'm at a loss for words. I can't just say I miss him. See you later. In the dressing room, we'll smoke and talk about drums." A week later, Billie Eilish at the Grammy Awards donned a blouse with Taylor's face on it when she was performing. At Lollapalooza, Brazil, Miley Cyrus, who replaced the Foo Fighters, broke down in tears on stage and dedicated her entire set to Taylor. Taylor's idol, Roger Taylor of Queen, tweeted a choked farewell photo with his son Rufus, Taylor's cherished pupil. Led Zeppelin's Jimmy Page shared a performance photo of himself and Taylor, remembering the technique, intensity, and stunning innocence of their younger friend. However, something else quickly replaced the outpouring of anguish: inquiries. Close calls were nothing new to Taylor Hawkins. After a cocaine overdose in London in 2001 that left him in a 2-week coma, he has worked hard to lead a healthy life, training hard and going to the doctor frequently. A few months prior to his passing, he assured Rolling Stone, "I recently had a complete examination. I'm in excellent health according to the doctor. I train like an endurance athlete, thus my heart is large." What actually occurred then? The results of a Columbia forensic investigation were alarming. Taylor's heart was almost twice as large as usual, at 600 grams. His system contained more than 10 chemicals, including opiates, tricyclic antidepressants, benzodiazepines, THC and more, according to a urine test. A cocaine-like substance was discovered in the room, according to some sources. Although the prosecutor's official statement eventually left this out, the uncertainty simply made the discomfort worse. In May 2022, Rolling Stone released an investigative article as fans struggled with the loss. According to close pals Chad Smith of the Red Hot Chili Peppers and Matt Cameron of Pearl Jam, Taylor had told management that he couldn't handle the demanding tour schedule of the Foo Fighters, and that he felt like he was going to pass out. Taylor reportedly stated, "I can't take it anymore," according to the article. However, days later, both Cameron and Smith retracted their statements, saying they were taken out of context. "This schedule is killing me." Representatives for the band, however, said nothing. Adding to the uncertainty, supporters split. Some believed it to be a tragic accident, the result of years of intense performances wearing down a former drug user's body. Others thought that Taylor had attempted to voice her opinions but had been disregarded in the sparkling chaos of the entertainment business. A knife to the hearts of those left behind. Taylor's farewell voicemail to his close friends, the Farrells, later came to light. "Please look out for one another. I'll look after myself. In Sao Paulo, see you. I love you guys." It wasn't a goodbye. It was a promise he couldn't keep. Taylor Hawkins' death remains without clear answers. No one can say for certain what happened. All we know is that a man who once beamed behind his drum kit, who bent down to sign an autograph for a 9-year-old girl in Paraguay, who dedicated an entire album to his daughter, quietly fell just before showtime. Perhaps he was simply exhausted, perhaps he was still trying, and perhaps in his final moments he still believed the show would go on, and that perhaps is the true tragedy. Legacy and impact. Taylor Hawkins was never the kind of person who sought titles. He never demanded the spotlight, nor did he need grand praise to validate his place. Yet when people speak of the greatest drummers of the modern era, names like John Bonham, Neil Peart, or Roger Taylor, Taylor Hawkins often appears quietly among them, not because of superhuman technique, but because of the wild, sincere spirit he poured into every strike of the drumstick. Taylor wasn't just the timekeeper for Foo Fighters, he was the band's second heartbeat. If Dave Grohl was the brain and soul, then Taylor was the lifeblood, the one who brought energy, fire and vitality to every performance. He didn't just play drums, he lived inside them. Each beat was a piece of himself, a piece of his heart, and a part of that bright, messy smile that always peeked out from behind his wild blonde hair. His technique was a fusion of classic rock, fire and grunge freedom, polished yet instinctive. He could make stadiums quake with The Pretender or All My Life, and just as easily step back, holding a steady groove for Grohl to take the lead, the ultimate bandmate. Beyond drumming, Taylor was also the frontman of his own band, Taylor Hawkins and the Coattail Riders, where he showcased his songwriting, vocals and stage presence on his own terms. The album Get the Money, 2019, was a clear reflection of that. Playful, introspective, filled with love for his family, and laced with the rebellious spirit of someone determined to live on his own terms. He also performed with Alanis Morissette, and appeared as a guest on projects by Slash, Brian May and Elton John, a trusted collaborator in the global rock scene. Taylor was a bridge between generations of artists. He revered legends like Roger Taylor and Jimmy Page, and became a role model to younger stars like Billie Eilish, Miley Cyrus, and countless young drummers who once stood in awe watching him perform. After his passing, many didn't just remember him as a musician, but as a mentor, a friend to all, always willing to talk, share and encourage. But perhaps the greatest legacy Taylor Hawkins left behind wasn't found in charts or records. It was in how he inspired others to live fully and authentically. He was once the fat dumb kid nobody liked who believed he would never amount to anything, until he picked up a pair of drumsticks and found what made him come alive. He lived fast, lived honestly, loved his kids so deeply he wrote an album for them, hugged young fans like family, and stepped outside just to take photos with a few people drumming on the sidewalk. Taylor didn't build monuments, but he left real footprints in the hearts of those who heard him play, saw his smile on stage, and mourned when he was suddenly gone. And like a drum solo, brief, maybe cut short, but played with every ounce of soul, it stays in the listener's heart forever. That's the kind of legacy Taylor Hawkins created. Taylor Hawkins didn't fade away like a star losing its light. He departed like the final thunderous strike in a rock song that ended too soon. He once said, "I don't want to preach about not doing drugs because I loved them, but I lost control and it almost killed me." It was a confession without filters, without polish, a rare kind of courage, especially in a world where fame often demands a clean image. Taylor lived truthfully. He loved music like a child, loved his family like a devoted father, loved his fans like old friends reunited, and he left this world the same way he lived, without warning, without spectacle, but leaving behind a void no one could ever fill. Over 2 decades with Foo Fighters, deeply personal solo albums, explosive drum solos, tender voice messages to friends, all of it has now become memory, but not a sad memory. Rather a reminder that some people don't need a full century to be remembered forever. If you've ever found yourself drumming along unconsciously to a Foo Fighters track, laughed watching Taylor hug his drum kit like a kid hugging a teddy bear, or felt a lump in your throat seeing his eyes during those final days, then maybe, in some way, you understand why Taylor Hawkins wasn't just a drummer, he was the heartbeat of an entire era. Share your favorite musical memory of Taylor Hawkins in the comments. And if you believe artists like him deserve to be remembered forever, like, subscribe, and ring the bell to keep these stories alive.